Hello everybody, today we are doing a deck tech on Slimefoot the Stowaway, a Golgari commander from Dominaria, which cares all about Saprolings, and almost nothing else. So, the game plan is obviously going to be to make many Saprolings. We just need as many creatures and ways to get them out, and also sacrifice them. You'll see on the screen there's the Thalids. They have spore counters, so every upkeep, you're going to put a spore counter on it. When it reaches 3 or more, you can sacrifice those. Instant speed, do it whenever you want to create a Saproling. Many of them have really good sacrifice effects, like sacrifice a Saproling to regenerate target fungus, to draw a card. I really enjoy the Deathspore Thalid. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. It almost turns your Saprolings into removal. Uh, Utopia Mycon is a great one because it can help mana fix. But even though we are a low CMC deck, it is very important to keep mana fixing and be able to make mana in as many ways as we can. Selenite Hermit we have here as a morph card. He's not a spore counter, but you can just instantly create, flip him up, morph him, and get 4 Saprolings. Just instant speed. 4 blockers. He also pumps all the Saprolings you have. He's a very solid card for the deck. Then, speaking of instant speed Saprolings, we do have instants, which create Saprolings for us. So luckily, Sprout Swarm and Scatter the Seeds come with Convoke, and Sprout Swarm has Buyback. Even though it only creates 1 Saproling, when you do get the engine rolling and you have plenty of mana and plenty of Saprolings, you can make quite an obscene amount of them. Scatter the Seeds is you get 3 Saprolings, so that's just perfect. Like with the commander, there is 3 triggers, easy, if you have a way to sacrifice them. So that's 3 damage to each opponent and 3 life gain. And Spore Swarm, we have instant speed, just create 3 1/1s. It's Scatter the Seeds, but a little cheaper and without Convoke. We also need some enchantments to make more Saprolings and do other things with Saprolings. We have Fungal Plots. You can exile a card from your graveyard to create a 1/1 Saproling. Necrogenesis does the same thing for 2 mana, but it's not as restrictive. But Fungal Plots has the added thing of sacrificing 2 Saprolings to gain 2 life and draw a card. So in many ways, Fungal Plots is better. Golgari Germination just creates Saprolings when a non-token creature dies. It's protection from board wipes. You still have Saprolings to do Saproling stuff. And then we have Black Market Connections, which is my favorite card in the whole deck. Because at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you choose 1 or more. You create a treasure card and lose 1 life. You draw a card and lose 2 life. Or create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling and lose 3 life. It's notable that Changeling is a Saproling as well. So for 6 life, you can create a treasure, draw a card, and create a Saproling. It's phenomenal. It is the MVP of the deck. Every game you draw it, you feel how impactful it is. Now we have the big hitters for Saproling creation. We have cards like Tendershoot Dryad, Verdant Force, and Verdant Embrace. Verdant Embrace is an aura that essentially turns any creature into Verdant Force, and the ability to create, beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. So Verdant Force does that. Verdant Embrace does that. It also enchants the creature with +3/+3. Tendershoot Dryad does the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green Saproling. And Saprolings you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing, which is as long as you have 10 permanents or more on the battlefield, you have the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. So even if Tendershoot Dryad goes away, you'll still have the City's Blessing. You just won't get the bonus effect from the Dryad, in case there are other cards that have the City Blessing mechanic. Then we have Michaeloth, which is really a blowout card. So when you have a big board of creatures, you want to throw the Michaeloth down if you have it. So Devour 2, as it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice any number of creatures, and that puts twice that many +1/+1 counters onto Michaeloth. And at the beginning of your upkeep, not every upkeep, but just yours, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token for each +1/+1 counter on the Michaeloth. So say you sacrifice 5 Saprolings to it, not only would you get the triggers from the commander or any other aristocrat effect on the board, you would also get 10 Saprolings on your upkeep. And it just snowballs out of control, this deck. So we also have a Squirrel Sub-Theme for extra tokens. With Chatterfang, he is a solid Golgari creature. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus that many +1 or 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens are created instead. So if you create 5 Saprolings, you also create 5 squirrels. And he has the added bonus of having almost a removal piece on him, where you pay 1 black, sacrifice X squirrels, and target creature gets +X, -X until end of turn. So Chatterfang, much like the Death Spore Thallid we talked about earlier, is a solid removal piece in the deck because you're going to have so many tokens. Scurry Oak is a very fun squirrel token generator. It's in here for the infinite combo with Ivy Lane Denizen, and so you can get infinite squirrels. Also, there's a couple big creatures, so the evolve mechanic on it will happen. It will trigger. And then Ivy Lane Denizen is whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So you can use this whenever a Saproling enters to make one of your other creatures bigger. Or with Scurry Oak, you have Ivy Lane Denizen in the battlefield, uh, have a Scurry Oak out, and then any green creature, like a squirrel or a Saproling, entering would cause Ivy Lane Denizen to add a counter to Scurry Oak. Scurry Oak would then create a green creature, so Ivy Lane Denizen would put a counter on Scurry Oak. You can get an infinite number of squirrel tokens, and your Scurry Oak will be infinitely strong. And then you can finally stop the combo by choosing to put the +1/+1 counter onto a different creature, like one of the squirrels, instead to stop the combo. And then just swing out. Then we have token doubling, which is necessary in every token doubler or token deck. We have Parallel Lives Doubling Season. Each of these has, if you would create one or more tokens under your control, it puts twice that many of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. Doubling Season has the added benefit of doubling counters as well. Second Harvest is an instant speed rather than an enchantment, so it's a one-time effect rather than persistent. For each token you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. And these all double off each other as well, which is why they're so efficient. Now that we have all of these tokens, squirrels, saprolings, everything we need, what do we do with it? How do we win? Well, we can go with the Aristocrat strategy of sacrificing our creatures and dealing damage to our opponents for each creature dying, or other benefits that go with the Aristocrat strategy. So obviously our commander has not a sack outlet, but a Aristocrat strategy built into him. Whenever a Saproling would die, he deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. We're just going to double down on that effect, since we are Saproling focused and our commander is Aristocrat focused. We're going to lean heavily into it with cards like Dina Soul Steeper. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. And Blood Artist. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. We also have Poison Tip Archer. Whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Zulaport Cutthroat. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Vindictive Vampire is the same effect, but deal 1 damage rather than lose life. That is relevant for a couple cards we'll talk about later in the game, later in the video. Bastion Remembrance, it also does that. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, but it has the added benefit of creating a 1/1 white human soldier creature token as a sacrifice fodder, as a blocker, or even to create a squirrel with Chatterfang if that's out. So we are adding multiple recurring effects on this, because if we only had Slimefoot, we wouldn't really have the Aristocrat strategy. We really need to double down on it. We're doing tokens and we're sacrificing them, and that's the game plan here. So now we get into some popular sacrifice outlets in the deck. We have Ashnod's Altar, which is a very strong piece because it allows you to gain mana to pump into Slimefoot's Saproling creation effect. We have Viscera Seer, which helps you thin your deck in a way by scrying and really just getting what you need next turn or whenever you draw next. And then Skull Clamp, which obviously it's a 1 mana equipment. With equip 1, equipped creature gets +1/-1, and whenever equipped creature dies, you draw 2 cards. So you just pay 1, put it onto a Saproling, that Saproling will die, and you'll draw 2 cards. So it's extra Aristocrat benefits. Then we have Mikaeus the Unhallowed. He's just here for his Undying mechanic that he gives to other non-human creatures you control. Because the Undying is when a creature with Undying dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter. So it dies, hits the graveyard, comes back. In the case of Saprolings, it will just come, it won't hit the graveyard, but you'll still get the Saproling back with +1/+1. Then we have Liliana Dreadhorde General, and she's here for whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. Also, very just effective removal with each player sacrifices 2 creatures in case you're fighting in a Voltron deck or fighting against a Voltron deck. So they just stack a whole bunch of equipment and auras on 1 creature and just keep swinging it at people. Liliana can also create a +2 or a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So if you need to rebuild and somebody board wiped creatures only, you can rebuild easily with Liliana, because you'll be drawing a whole bunch of cards. You can create a creature, you can sacrifice or cause each player to sacrifice stuff. But her ultimate, her -9 ability, each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type, then sacrifices the rest. Really just cements the victory for you if you have Slimefoot and a bunch of Saprolings out. You just choose Slimefoot, or that's only opponents. Anyways, you choose to do that, and your opponents are forced to make a hard choice of which land do I keep, which artifact, which enchantment, which creature, or which planeswalker if they have multiple. It really is a win more condition in this deck, not a we need that. It's just that if we get there, it's good. Mostly she's in the deck for the card draw, creating a zombie token if you need it. The other win strategy is with swarm over and overrun effects, like Craterhoof Behemoth. Say you have 10 Saplings on board, and then you play a Craterhoof, you will have a bunch of creatures that will get +11/+11. And they all have trample, and it's almost just an easy win con for the deck in case you can't get the Aristocrat strategy going. If people keep removing your sack outlets or the pieces that deal the damage, Craterhoof can come out and surprise quite a few people. And Triumph of the Hordes does the same thing, because you don't need to drain all their life. You will only need to put 10 damage on them, because it turns all the damage into Infect. So it'll put poison counters on it. It's not as effective as Craterhoof, because they don't get +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. But the infect almost makes it easier sometimes. So we have, or okay, so we know the win cons now, and now we need to get to them. We have plenty of ways of card draw. We have the black market connections we talked about earlier. We have village rights, which also has the added benefit of sacking a creature as an additional effect to cast this spell. It'll help you draw 2 cards, sack a creature. Sometimes that'll even draw you an extra card depending on what you have on board. We have an enchantment, Phyrexian Arena, which is phenomenal. It's almost an auto include in any black deck. When at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. We have Dark Confidant, which I put in because I like the card and I had a copy, but it's not truly important to the deck. It's just a win more thing in my mind, much like Liliana. So at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. And as a general rule, everything in this deck is pretty low CMC. Lots of lower cost cards. It's a 2/1 for 2 mana. And just hope it survives for your next upkeep, because it normally doesn't. Then we have other sources of card draw, like Moldervine Reclamation and Enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So these enchantments and all the extra life gain from the Aristocrat strategy really lets you use your life as a resource. So you don't have to worry about taking the 6 damage from Black Market Connections or Phyrexian Arena, or being really scared of not blocking an opponent's creature because you have so many ways of gaining life. We also have an instant speed body count. It's a 2 and a black for draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn. Or you can spectacle cost it for 1, so 1 black. You may cast this spell for its spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn. So say somebody board wipes you and you had your commander out. Your commander is going to deal damage to your opponents. That's considered loss of life. Loss of life is not considered damage, but damage is considered loss of life. So, and then you draw a card for each Saproling or other creature you had out that died, which many times is an obscene amount. You'll draw 10 plus cards easily. This is a very good source of card draw in the deck. We also have Keen Sense and Snake Umbra, which do the same thing in this deck. Snake Umbra is obviously the better version. They're enchantment auras. What you're going to want to do with them is put them on the commander, because whenever enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So when Slimefoot's ability triggers, that's considered damage. It says deal 1 damage to each opponent on it. So you can draw 3 cards, 1 for each opponent, and it's very efficient at just getting you the win, getting you to your win cons. Snake Umbra is the better version. It does cost 2 more, but it gives +1/+1, the same card draw effect, and Totem Armor. Totem Armor is if enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. So it's almost like it's just a very good protection as well as card draw. People need to think twice if it's worth it to remove your commander. So we have all the card draw. We just now need to get the mana to cast everything. Get the mana to get the win. How we do that is, obviously, we're in green, so we have lots of ramp. Cards like Rampant Growth, Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, Farseek. Sorcery Speed, search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Some of them do 2 basic lands, put 1 on the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Farseek's a little bit more restrictive, because search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle. But it's also better because it doesn't specify basic land. So you could grab one of the more expensive mana fixing lands that I will show in just a second. And we also ramp with mana rocks. This deck is pretty light on the ramp and mana rocks because we don't have very high of a mana curve. So I didn't feel the need to include too many mana rocks or too much ramp. Just these 7 mana rocks and ramp spells has worked pretty efficiently for me. So we have a Soul Ring, a 1 mana, tap to add 2 mana. It's an MVP and it should be in every commander deck. We have Arcane Signet as well. It's a 2 mana, tap for 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. It is once again a staple and should be in every commander deck. Then we have Golgari Signet, 2 mana to pay 1 and tap it to add a black and a green mana. So it's mana fixing. Say you have Ashnod's Altar, but you don't have enough colored mana. You can use Ashnod's Altar to sacrifice a creature to get 2 colorless, use one of the colorless to make a black and a green mana. It's a very good card for just fixing your mana and or just adding an extra mana if you're needing it for spells. Then we have some other mana sources like Underseller Myconid, which is a new card from Baldur's Gate for the Saproling tribal decks. When it enters the battlefield or dies, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. It's a 1/2 for 3 mana, 2 in a green, and you tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So it is not only a mana dork, but it also creates a Saproling on entering the battlefield or dying. So it's very efficient. It's honestly a MVP of the deck. When you get it early, you feel great. When you get it late, not as good, but still, it's you get 2 creatures for 1, and one of them's a mana dork. Then we have Cryptolith Rites. Now this is a huge card, which is very polarizing. The table will either forget about you and forget you have it, or they will remember it because they know what it can do. So it is 1 and a green for an enchantment that creatures you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it turns every creature on your board into a mana dork. So say you have 20 Saprolings and your commander, you can tap all 20 Saprolings to activate the commander's ability 5 times, which is to pay 4 mana and create a Saproling. Then we have Culling Ritual, which is kind of like a board wipe. It destroys each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Add a black or a green mana for each permanent destroyed this way, and it is 2 black green for sorcery. So you're going to want to do this if you're playing against a deck that has a bunch of cheap artifacts, or if you have a big board state set up of many Saprolings, because tokens are 0 mana value. So Culling Ritual will kill a lot of every token, and then you will have that many triggers on Slimefoot or any other Aristocrat piece you have. So you'll easily do this we'll go with 10 Saprolings again, and then there will be 10 Slimefoot triggers, dealing 10 damage to each opponent, and you gain 10 life. Not only that, you get the added benefit of adding the mana in any color combination that you want of black or green, up to however many creatures died, or non-land permanents died. So it's very efficient. I haven't had too many games where it's hurt me more than helped me. It's mostly been interaction with the opponent that made it hurt me. Then we have tutors. This is where the deck gets really expensive. I started the deck out pretty cheap, but I just kept adding more things like Crater Hoof, Triumph of the Hordes, a bunch of the tutors. So Grim Tutor is fairly cheap. It's 1 black for a sorcery. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library, and you lose 3 life. So Grim Tutor and Dig Up were in the deck when I first made it as cheaper tutors. Dig Up is 1 green for a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Or you can play its cleave cost for 1 black in green. And if you do, you search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So it's ramp if you need it, or it's a tutor if you need to find one of your win cons. And that's what these tutors are here for. They're here to find win cons, like your win condition or an answer if you need it, like culling ritual or some removal. So demonic tutor is 1 and a black for a sorcery. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So obviously it's just whatever card you want plus 1 and a black. It is an efficient and I think my favorite tutor, because as long as you have the mana, you can do whatever you want that turn. Vampiric Tutor is good as well. It is 1 black for an instant. Search your library for a card, then shuffle your library, put that card on top of it. You lose 2 life. I don't think I need to say how good that is. It is, I think, the best tutor in black. I prefer Demonic Tutor, but that's just me because I like the sorcery speed of it, where you get to just play it on your turn and it doesn't really surprise anybody. You play it and then you get to the card you want and you just play the card you want. Vampiric Tutor is open to a little bit more danger because you search your library for a card, you put that card on top of it. Normally you do it on the end step before your upkeep, but still is some room for card deck shuffling interaction with your opponents. So Vampiric Tutor is better, but I do prefer Vampiric Tutor is better, but I do prefer Demonic Tutor. Then we get into removal. There's not too much removal in this deck. There was Culling Ritual for 2 or less CMC, but mostly it's player removal. That's what the deck is based around. We have Putrefy, an instant for 1 black green. Destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. Eaten Alive for a single black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or pay 3 and a black. So it exiles target creature or planeswalker. This is great because it can allow you to sacrifice a creature to start dealing damage to people and gaining some life with all the aristocrat effects. We also have Mortality Spear, 2 black green for an instant. This spell costs 2 less to cast if you gain life this turn, which is often the case with this deck. So you destroy target non-land permanent. This can get rid of enchantments, artifacts, creatures, planeswalkers. It's very, very versatile. Then we have some more utility cards. Growing Rites of Itlimoc is just a great card. When it enters the battlefield, it's a legendary enchantment for 2 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a card from among them, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform Growing Rites of Itlimoc. It then turns into a land which taps for green, or a land that taps for green for each creature you control, which is incredibly effective, especially in a go-wide token strategy deck like this. Then we have Heroic Intervention, which is 1 and a green, instant speed. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This can help protect you from a board wipe if you are not ready for all your creatures to die. Because normally this deck is okay with being board wiped, because we have so many ways of dealing damage when our creatures die. But Heroic Intervention is in here to help keep the pieces alive that you need to. It'll keep the whole board alive, but then you can choose when to attack with them if they die or to block with them. It's just a very good utility card for the deck that really ramps the power level up. Then we have Nyxbloom Ancient. This is just one of those win more cards. It is 4 green, green, green for an enchantment creature elemental. It's a 5/5 trample creature, but the important part is if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. So all your lands tap for 3 times the amount of mana they would. All your creatures with Cryptolith rights tap for 3 times as many. Even the treasure tokens that we create through a creature in the deck or black market connections, those will tap for 3 more, because it is tap it to sacrifice a treasure to gain 1 mana of any color, but this will make it 3. As I said, it is a win more card. If you play it, it's very the board will want to remove it instantly, and that's almost good in some cases, because if they spend their removal on that rather than one of the win cons in the deck, then that's ideal for you. Then we have some utility lands like Castle Lochthwain. When it enters the battlefield, uh, ETB's tapped unless you control a swamp, and it taps for a black mana. Or you can pay 1 black and tap it to draw a card, and then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So it's just extra card draw if you're finding yourself behind or unable to catch back up. And then we have Cabal Coffers, which is pay 2 mana and tap it to add black for each swamp you control. So we are in a 2-color deck with black and green, and there are plenty of swamps in this deck. So unless you play this super early, you'll normally be tapping for more than you tapped it cost to tap it. So you pay 2 mana, so 2 lands and it essentially. As long as you have 3 swamps, it'll tap even. If you have more than 3, it'll tap positive. Then we have Nurturing Peatland, which is pay 1 life to add a black or a green mana, or you pay 1 and tap it to sacrifice it and then draw a card. This is another catch-up card like Castle Lochthwain, or just keep yourself ahead card. Like if you already have all the mana you need, you can just sacrifice Nurturing Peatland to then draw a card and use some more of that mana. With some more utility lands like Boseiju, who endures, taps for a green, or channel it for 1 and a green to discard it, and then destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search their library for a land with a basic land type, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. This ability costs 1 less for each legendary creature you control. So since our commander is so cheap, that'll almost always be in effect. So we'll just have to pay a green to discard Boseiju, and then it's a removal spell for an artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land. Then we have Inkmoth Nexus, which is just a land for tap 1 generic to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 and it becomes a 1/1 Blink Moth artifact creature with flying and infect until end of turn. It's still land. This is important because with Triumph the Hordes earlier, we can get some infect started on people or finish them off with infect. If I wasn't going to run Triumph the Hordes, I wouldn't be running this land in the deck, but it's there in case somebody can prevent 1 of the 10 poison counters needed to remove them from the game. Then this could go in and swing. This Inkmoth Nexus could turn into a creature and then attack them with 1 flying infect. It has a little evasion because of the flying, but if somebody blocks it, it still puts a -1/-1 counter on the creature that blocks it. We also have Phyrexian Tower as a utility land. Add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Or tap it to sacrifice a creature to add 2 black to your mana pool. And this is important because we're in a sacrifice creature strategy. So it really just helps you out more. Like it's a win more effect. It creates 2 black, and you get rid of a creature like a Saproling that you will be inevitably creating. Then we have the mana fixing lands like Deathclap Blade, Woodland Cemetery, Undergrowth Stadium, and Overgrown Tomb. These all have special enter the battlefield conditions, but they all tap for a black or a green. So Deathcap Glade enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more lands, 2 or more other lands. Woodland Cemetery enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest. Undergrowth Stadium enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, which is almost always the case, unless people started dying early in the game. And then Overgrown Tomb enters the battlefield. You may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. So if you need the mana that turn, you can pay 2 life. It's the best of the bunch in my mind. Then we have other mana fixing lands like Evolving Wilds. You can sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. It's not an immediate mana fixing, but for next turn, say if you only have one swamp or one forest and you needed two, you can play Evolving Wilds, sack it, get the land you need for next turn. Then we have Command Tower, which taps to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity, which is just phenomenal in every deck. So then we have Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and Yavimaya. So these are special lands. They are legendary, and they make each land a swamp or a forest in addition to their other land types, which is very efficient, and they include themselves, so they tap for mana even though they don't explicitly say it on them. Urborg works with Cabal coffers very well by making every land a swamp, so you're always going to have plenty of swamps, and your Cabal coffers will tap for 7 or 8 rather than 3 or 4. Now we're on to the infinite combos that help you win the game. We have the combo that I built the deck around, Slimefoot, a token doubler like Doubling Season or Parallel Lives, and Ashnod's Altar. So for this combo, all you need is Slimefoot, Ashnods, and either Parallel Lives or Doubling Season on board, and at least 4 mana to create a Saproling, or have 2 Saprolings on board. And then what you're going to do is sacrifice both the Saprolings to Ashnod's Altar to create 4 colorless mana. When those 2 Saprolings die, Slimefoot will ping all of your opponents for 2 damage. You'll gain 2 life. And then with that 4 mana you have floating, you're going to activate Slimefoot's ability to create a Saproling, which then the token doubler will double, and then you can do that combo again because you'll have 2. You sacrifice the 2 to create 4 mana, use the 4 mana to create 2 more, you sacrifice them, you create 2 more, and it's just infinite, dealing 1 damage to each opponent and you gaining 1 life. This is the win con of the deck, and it's not as efficient as some CEDH win cons, but it's Slimefoot the Stowaway. It's a Saproling tribal deck. It doesn't need to be efficient. We're here for Saprolings. Then we have another infinite combo. This one's a bit fun. Chatterfang, Squirrel General, and Pitiless Plunderer. What we're going to do is essentially just use sacrifice the squirrels to create token. You have to have a squirrel on board, and Chatterfang, and Pitiless Plunderer. What you're going to do is then pay a black to sacrifice X squirrels for target creature gets plus X minus X until end of turn. And when a squirrel dies, Pitiless Plunderer is going to create a treasure token, which will then cause Chatterfang to trigger, creating a squirrel for every treasure token. So you're going to just use that treasure to sacrifice the squirrel to give target creature plus X minus X until end of turn. It can essentially kill every creature that isn't yours on the board. It's a one-sided board wipe if nobody has interaction. As long as you can target the creatures, say if they have hexproof or shroud, you won't be able to affect them with this. Also, this will really help in the Aristocrat strategy, because you can just keep dealing 1 damage from all the Aristocrat effects, like Blood Artist, Poison Tip Archer. It just doubles down on all of our win cons, and even does create some extra mana for us. Then we have the Ivy Lane Denizen Scurry Oak combo of creating infinite squirrels and making Scurry Oak infinitely strong. I talked about this earlier, but it's not exactly a win condition. It just helps you win. It's a win more thing. Or Ivy Lane Denizen is very effective just played early, because whenever a green creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Those were the infinite combos for Slimefoot the Stowaway, the win cons, how to get there, and the strategy of just making saprolings, making tokens, and killing them off. Thank you for watching today. If you liked the video, please subscribe, actually hit the like button, and hit the bell. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.